Hello, welcome back. Yes, it's all about running adventures, running the game. This is definitely all about running adventures, and we are covering the introduction to quests and adventures and using quest maps. This is the topic I'm going to be covering for today. I'm going to do a short presentation and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of this. We will have a bit of more of a discussion in the live chat around this. It is very hot right now, and I am not putting up a poll because one, I forgot, and I just don't know that I have anything that are useful to ask today. So grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and we'll get started in a second. This should be a very short presentation, I would say less than 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll go straight into the concept of maps. Now you can see a map out right now. That's deliberate on my part. Anyway, let's get started. And there, and that. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about role-playing games. Why use a quest map in your adventures? That is the question for today. There are a couple of different reasons to do so, and I thought I would cover that today. So using a quest map or an adventure map, there's probably some key reasons why you would do it. So maps help serve as a departure point, the starting point for a quest involving some sort of exploration when you're exploring your adventure, exploring the world that your adventure takes place in. Many of the players' questions are actually answered with a quest map and a pictorial map. So when you want to reduce the amount of work that you need to do, a map will certainly help to a certain degree. The players can also plan out a route on that map for the quest's destination, because if you give them a quest map, you probably have a destination point and a departure point or a starting point. So then they can then draw out that route that they would prefer to take. Maps for a quest don't have to be complete. In fact, they can be incomplete. They can even have inaccurate information on them. So when the players first get them, you may include inaccurate or incorrect information or an incomplete map. Now, why would you do something like this? A map is just a way of organizing and presenting information easily to players. I mean, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. So an incomplete section on a quest map encourages the players to explore the world and fill in the gaps. There's one reason for doing this, by giving it an incomplete map. So there's still some unknown things out there that they won't know the exact position of. They'll find them as they go. Inaccurate information in an adventure map, so when you get an adventure map or a quest map, this can certainly cause confusion for the players if you have inaccurate information on it. But it also forces the players to verify the information on the map when something is found to be incorrect. It is always unwise to include only fictitious or false information on a map. You only want to include a little bit of that. It is much harder for the players to get lost or to become unengaged from your adventure if you include some sort of map with your adventure or your quest. Now, if the players don't write notes, and quite often players don't write notes, or they don't make any kind of record as they're going on their adventure or their quest, a map gives them a better idea of what direction to take and will encourage them to draw or write down notes sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. So it is certainly a method for, particularly with an incomplete map, it is a way of training your players into taking notes, even if it's just a pictorial representation. Do you always give out a map? That would be my question to you. There is no sort of right or wrong answer with this. It is simply a tool like all things out there, a tool that you use in the way that you think will be suitable for your group. But I would encourage you to use an adventure map or a quest map. It will certainly make your life a lot easier. I hope this was useful to you and interesting. I want to thank you for listening and watching. I want to thank my patrons who support me on Patreon. And hey, till next time, Keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm still here. I'm not gone. There's a problem. My room is like an oven. Okay, I'm really sweating. So instead of me trying to do this, and just overheat, I'm going to take my hat off. That'll be the first thing that I get rid of. But that's not the only thing I need to get rid of. I'm going to have to open the window of my office and my door. My house is quite noisy today, so you will hear background noise, and there's not much I can do about that. Okay, and they're having a really good time. So there's going to be a lot of squealing and screaming from little children, things like that. So if it's too much for you, I understand. I don't intend this to be a long live stream, but I did want to have a good chat around the quest map and that sort of thing. So I'm going to put up my be back soon screen only for about a minute, and then I'll be back and we'll go into the chat and have a bit more discussion. I'll pull some of these ideas apart a bit more, but I need to do something to actually keep myself cool, otherwise I'm going to pass out. It is better. I've got a bit of breeze blowing through my office now, which will make life a little bit easier to deal with everything, which I'm thankful for. It's probably the this is going to be an interesting. I might have to shorten this this live stream. It might be a short one for today. We'll see how we go. So a couple of things about live streams now. I think maybe I'm going to have to cancel. You let me know if the background noise is too much, and I will just shut it down and we'll just say it's a very short one for today. They're having a really good time, and I'm not going to crush that. You know, it's the holidays period. That's the whole deal. You know, everybody's doing their own thing. So there's a couple of things you might have noticed. I had a battle mat up before, and really it's not a big large map. Okay, it's quite a small map. This is really to represent probably a larger scale map. When I'm talking about a quest map or an adventure map, I'm talking about a larger scale map. But you can still use short, small maps that only have 4 or 5 locations. That's still useful to players. Players do like maps because it gives them some idea about making choice. One of the things you'll find with map presentation by a game master, it's not just about having a starting point so you know where you are in terms of the world that you have to deal with. It's not just about a departure point and knowing where your destination is. It's about, it shows you the potential options and choices that you have ahead of you. And players like that sort of thing. It's a good representation about, well, we could go and explore this or we could go and explore that. Like that's what you're dealing with here. So if I jump back to my battle mat here, I want to sort of point out a couple of things. So first off, you'll notice here's our player characters. Yep. And there are really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places they could go. Oh, you've got to be kidding. There's a fly now. It's gone. There are 5 options here for them in this map, when you give them this map. Now, you don't need to put out what is in these locations, but these are the choices. They could go around the trees and head into this cave here. They could come around this way and go down that way into this cave location. They could go into here where there is a statue. They could go to this small alcove. Or they could find a way to get past the boulders to get into this chamber over here. So there are 5 choices. They don't necessarily know that there are skeletons in this chamber. They don't know that there's a dragon or a wormling in this place. They don't know that there are orcs or a shaman. Will not be aware that there is a gelatinous cube, and they won't know that there is a Skull Lord over here, okay? They don't know what's in those locations. They just know what the pictorial location looks like. Now they have a choice. There are many different directions they could take. They actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 different choices. And later on they get a 5th choice if they decide to move the boulder over here. That's the benefit of a map. It's about making their choices obvious to them rather than having to explain it to them. One of the things that I was taught when I was learning to teach is that by teaching, we teach by getting people to ask questions. By them asking questions, they will learn more than if I were to simply provide them with information. Because when people ask questions, it's an indication that they haven't fallen asleep, because you can't ask a question if you've fallen asleep, okay, which is very important. But there's another aspect to that, and that is you know that they are invested, they are interested in some way because they are asking the question. If they were completely bored and they weren't interested, they would never have asked the question in the first place. So that's part of the thing that you're trying to do, is you're trying to force people to ask questions, okay? But if you're not going to force them to ask questions, by laying out a map, it then starts that process of them speculating what is where. You know, they have choices they have to make. You don't have to say there are 5 choices. Okay, you don't even have to say there are 4 choices or 3 choices. You simply lay out the map and they can see the representation. Now, I know one of the arguments against using a quest map or an adventure map, whether it's complete or incomplete or inaccurate in some way, is that, you know, in medieval times there weren't a lot of maps, right? And we play in a fantasy world quite often, not a science fiction world. So you wouldn't have maps, correct? It would not be normal to necessarily have a map of some kind. And I understand that rationale. If that's the sort of game you want to play, then of course giving out a map would be a bad idea. But a map doesn't need to be a piece of parchment or a piece of paper. It might be, a map might be put onto in the form of a tattoo or on a skull, or it might be partial, or it can be placed in a puzzle that you have to get into. Okay, getting access to that map is going to require you to solve some sort of problem. You might have to go and buy one. You might have to actually seek out somebody who has the map. There's a couple of different ways. I mean, it really is about how do you get the map to them. That's your next question, right? Is how do I get the map to them? Winning it in a game of chance, gambling game of some kind, whether it is allocated to them as part of their heritage. It's a gift, as a gift from somebody else. Somebody just simply hands it to them. Maybe they have to go and buy it. Maybe they have to steal it. There's lots of different ways you can get the map into their hands. But that's why we do this. There's another part of this, and I think the benefits, and surprisingly you'll find that a lot of people do this. They'll make their own map and they'll treat it with vinegar or tea bags or some other thing. That they'll put it in the oven, they'll burn it a little bit, but they'll remove sections of the map so it's not complete for the players. And that's done quite deliberately, right? You're doing that because you don't want them to have the complete layout. So when you do something like that, what you're generally trying to do is, there's a couple of different ways. You can leave the destination point on the map and the starting point, but you take away some of the stuff in between. Not all of it, because you still want them to be able to find a pathway. There's another way you can do this, and is you can break up your map into different pieces. So if you give them part of the map that gives them part of the original or the initial journey, but not the final destination, and they have to find more maps along their way to fill in the gaps, that can certainly help. So you can break up your map into 2 or 3 pieces, and completing the first part of the adventure will get you access to the second half of your map. And that's not only the only way you can do it, okay? So that's the incomplete kind of concept. More often you'll find game masters, dungeon masters use the incomplete map as a tool, right? Then there's the incorrect map. Now the map that you give out that is not necessarily a red herring. Giving out a red herring map where what they get is a map that leads nowhere to nothing, it doesn't represent anything, it might have the starting point but nothing else sort of matches up. That is confusing for players. But if most of the information on the map you provide them for their quest is correct, but there are some small details that are no longer correct, now why would that be? Is that done deliberately? In fact, the reason is often not deliberate. The reason for having incorrect information on a quest map is because over time things change. So maybe there on your map there is a hill, and on that hill there is a tree and a statue. And they know that this is the tree called One Tree Hill or the Monolith Hill. They're going to go there. But when they get to the hill is still there. But the tree has been cut down and the statue's been destroyed. So over the passage of time, things will happen that will change your landscape. So your map is now old information. Things have progressed from there. Maybe there is a village marked on the map. And you're like, okay, we're going to go to this village, the village of Homlet. But we get to the village of Homlet and we find that there's no village. It's just a burnt out husk. Something's happened since that map was made. So that's why you would have incorrect information. It's one of the easiest, most sensible, and makes sense to players. It'll make sense to you. So this is why you would have things that would change. You might find that there's a section of the map that says that there's a road, but when you get to the road, there's just a great huge hole. Now, why is the hole there? Maybe a mine nearby has collapsed and the road has fallen in, creating a crevasse. So there's no road anymore. Maybe the forest that you thought was supposed to be on your map is no longer there. Well, why is it gone? Maybe it died off. Maybe it was there, many hundreds of years ago, but now what has happened is there was a forest fire and the thing just burnt down. And now I should have said hi to Fred Huber. Thank you, Fred Huber, for being here, and Chris. I appreciate it. Chris Broskett. So those are some of the reasons why you would use a map and have incorrect information on it. I just need a drink of water. Now, the other reason that you want to use a map for your quest is training your players. Now, you can't tell me that you don't have players or didn't have players in the past who are really bad at remembering stuff. Yep. Whether it's remembering facts and information about an NPC or what their quest is in the first place, sometimes even the players forget what the actual goal or adventure hook was in the first place. And they lose that because they don't write anything down. And if you play every week, the chances are that people will remember. But life gets busy, people forget stuff. If you only play once a fortnight or once a month, they're even more likely to forget what they're supposed to be doing. This happens in my group, okay? And we've been playing for years. And we have people who do take notes and do draw maps. I tend to draw maps, so does JP. JP takes pretty accurate notes, but he's not the only one who does that as well. We've got some people who've got very good memories, but that's not always going to work for your group. So what are we doing when we give them a quest map and we're trying to train our players? Probably the hardest thing is to train your players to take notes about information. But one of the easiest things to train them to do is to draw a map. So how do you do that? You start the map for them. This is why you give them the point that you start at, okay? Where you're actually going to present yourself a departure point. So they know this is where I am in the world. The map is incomplete. I have to fill in the rest. And you do some of the work for them to show them how to do that. So as they explore, they're like, okay, we went north, and to the north there was nothing on the map, but when we went north, we found that there was actually a large castle. Well, we can now mark that castle on our map. You've now given them the beginning. So you've started the map for them, you're now presenting it. What is even better about a map is you can write notes and annotate on a map. So it's not just, let's draw a little picture of a castle. We can write the word castle, and once we learn the name of the castle, if that is possible when they get there, you can write in the name of the castle. That's information. You now have more, you are actually forcing them to actually write in information, write stuff down. Okay? Drawing pictures, easy to get players to do with a map. Writing stuff down is the next thing. But that's what will tend to happen, is they will annotate on the map itself. The next thing you'll find is as they keep exploring, and they're, okay, we got to a river, and at the river, we were trying to cross it, and we couldn't get across. But we came across a talking fish and made friends with the talking fish, and the talking fish helped us get across the river. That was fast moving, right next to a waterfall. Okay? And so they will mark down on the map where it says river, and whatever the name of the river is, if it even has a name, but they'll write down talking fish. I've found this to be the case quite often. They will mark down the sorts of threats and things they came across in those locations. So they'll know that when they come back to this river again, they need to find the talking fish because they want to get back across. And because they're buddies now, since they didn't eat it, hopefully, but that's what players do, is they start to fill in not just the landmarks on the map, but who and what is there. If they go to a village and they find a village as they're exploring along this road that they don't really know the destination to, ultimately they find a village, to find out the village is called Hamlet, they can mark that down on the map, and then when they go in, they find that the vast majority of the population is not there anymore. It's gone, but maybe there's still a trading post. So they can mark down trading post. And if there's a person in that trading post or somebody who owns that place, they'll probably write down the name of the person operating the trading post so they remember. The map now becomes their way of taking notes. It's a short form guaranteed. It is not going to be perfect, but it is essentially a tool for getting your players to take notes when they simply don't do it. And you don't expect them to bring the paper or the pen. You bring the pencil or the pen with you, and you give it to them, and you give them the map, and you've already started it. It's a printout. You hand it to them. There you go. And if it's not a printout, and you're playing digital, then you send the map to them via Facebook or Google or Discord or something like that. You put it somewhere where they can actually go and refer back to it later on. And they'll start to take notes on it, whether that is to write in little bits of information that relate to it. But playing in person makes it much easier because a physical map usually translates into they start drawing and taking annotated notes. So that's why I'm saying you probably want to do this. Okay, I'm just going to drink another bit of water. Now, one of the things that you probably will come across, there are many adventures where you want your players to get lost, but other times that you don't want them to get lost. And so if you don't want your players to get lost, particularly when you're dealing with a complex location, a good example of this is the mega dungeon or the dungeon crawl. Now, mega dungeons and dungeon crawls have extensive map locations. It's quite large. It's hard to track. Now, in the past, we were never given any information about, nobody provided us with a map. If we go old school, you start off, the game master, dungeon master would describe the location. You would draw it out on your piece of paper. Someone would do the mapping, so you knew how to navigate through this complex labyrinth or maze of passageways and rooms, so you knew where to go. What I would suggest to you is that's probably not the best approach to do anything. What you can do is you could give them the entire mega dungeon with nothing marked on it that indicates what's there. They just know the layout of it, or you give them a starting point and part of it. And by giving them part of it, you have just encouraged them to start to map out the location. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either describe it and get them to draw it, and then when they draw it, you can check to see if they're drawing it correctly, and then you can update it. You can get them to correct it if there's any major flaws in their sort of their drawing, or you don't have to correct it, and you can let them map it out from your starting point or a couple of locations within that map. And if they make errors and it doesn't look quite perfect, then you don't worry about it. There's another approach, and that is you give them the map, just the starting point. You get them to draw it, or you continue to add to the map over time, so that as they explore more locations, you draw in a new location for them. So it's not something that they necessarily have to do themselves. If you find you haven't got a group who will do any drawing, even when you give them an incomplete map and they still won't map, maybe the easiest way to deal with that is to draw out each location as they explore it and add it to the existing map, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But when you're dealing with a mega dungeon, it's very, very confusing. So I always found that it was a good idea to use a combination. So the players draw their own map. You give them a starting point, you draw it out, sort of the starting location a little bit, and then you give it to them and let them continue. And then later on, you can produce your own map in parts to represent what they're trying to. So you draw your own map and you can show it to them, and they can then look at your map and their map, and they can correct their map. You can give the map that you've created to them, but then that they'll tend to sort of think, okay, well, you're just going to do all the work for me. You can take that map away. You can take that map away and say, oh, no. You can look at my map and what I've drawn, and then you need to correct your map and draw it out the way that you think it's going to make sense for you. Okay? And then they will. That's exactly what they will do. So that still gets them doing part of the recording process. Anyway. I've had a lot of questions about how do I deal with a mega dungeon and mapping out a mega dungeon, or how do I help the players navigate through Castle Ravenloft, or the halls of Undermountain are another good example of it's such a large location. How do you contend with that? And partial maps or incomplete maps is probably one of the smartest ways to deal with that. I've always found that to be a really useful tool. And then you supplement that with some of your own drawing or own map work, so that the players can correct anything they might get horribly wrong. There's a reason why older maps in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, are all drawn on a grid, where the passageways are sort of square and everything's sort of rectangular or square, or there's no really weird shapes necessarily. I mean, natural caves will always be unusual shapes, but by using a grid, it makes it easier for you to map it out. There's a reason why they did that. It's so that you can explain things. Okay, so I go north for about 30 feet, then I turn left or to the west or the east, and I go for another 50 feet. And that's sort of that's what you're trying to do is, and the room you come to is 20 foot by 20 foot or 35 foot by 20 foot. And so they can draw it out on their square grid to help them map that process a little bit easier. Okay. All right. It looks like it's pretty quiet in the chat today, which is fine. I'm going to wrap it up right here. I would normally go over a lot more, but it's a really hot day. What am I doing in the future? So this will, of course, be the absolute final one for 2023. This was just supposed to be very short. I'm going to be covering nothing. So I'll be doing no live stream tomorrow and no live stream the day after. So no live stream in New Zealand daylight time on New Year's or on the day after New Year's. There are public holidays here. I'm going to take that time off from live streaming. I don't think it's going to be appropriate to be doing that sort of thing. And I need a break. I need a little bit of a break. And I'm going to take that break when I need it. But on Wednesday in New Zealand, we'll be doing Morkbork character creation for the Oculate Herb Master. We've been doing a lot of, I guess, building around the the Swedish game Morkbork, and so that's the final class that I have in the book to cover. So we'll be doing a character build for the Oculate Herbmaster on Wednesday. Happy New Year to you. Now, Lizzie Thomas, did I get it? Lizzie Thomas, did I get your name right? You tell me if I got your name right. So I'm going to do that. Then after that, the day after, and that's New Zealand Wednesday, okay? But if you're in North America, that would be something like a Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday. For me, Thursday I'll be talking about how to play or run a Star Wars role-playing game. I like Star Wars a lot. I like playing in the Star Wars universe and galaxy. Even though, some of the things I've done with the brand or the stories behind Star Wars I don't agree with. What I will say is that doesn't mean I don't want to play with that, because I can do my own thing. When it's a tabletop role-playing game, you can do your own thing. The Herbmaster sounds fun? Good. Yes, Herbmaster is definitely potions, people. If you're wondering about what it is, it's potions. The other thing is I wanted to do that very much just before end of my holidays, just before I start my holidays. So just the last day I work, which will be the Thursday, I'll be doing Star Wars, how to play and run a Star Wars adventure or campaign, and some of the things that you might want to build around that. It'll be very general, but hopefully it'll be fun. For you in North America, that would be a Wednesday, I believe. And then after that, I'm on holiday. Now, I may live stream painting, but the problem in New Zealand is it's so hot, even with a retardant, and I don't think I want to use a retardant if I can help it. I would have to use a retardant because the brush, from the time I take the paint onto the brush to the time it gets to the miniature, it'll be dry. It is so humid and so hot right now that painting in this weather is probably not very practical. Not unless I were to do it extremely early in the morning. Not something I'm sure I want to do, and it stays hot and light until almost 9:30 at night. So I might do some miniature painting when I go on holiday. I might not. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. But I will, even if I don't do the live streams, I'll release something else, okay? I'll still release something else. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. All the best with those of you who are having New Year's very shortly. I hope that you don't get too drunk and get up to too much mischief, but at least enjoy yourself and maybe set some goals, some things that you want to do with yourself, and, maybe change your world a little bit. That's usually the idea, right, behind a new year, is like, okay, whatever happened in the past, I can move on and I can try and do something different. And yes, that's where my head is at. Hopefully that is where your head is at. So a huge thank you to everybody who's been here listening and watching. I do appreciate it. I certainly want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon. I want to thank you, Fred Huber, for being here, Chris Broskett, and Lizzie Thomas. Thank you for feeding into the chat and putting in a comment. I do appreciate it. I haven't put up a poll today, quite deliberate. I'm going to make this very quick and fast. Will you see some edited videos from me? You probably will. You probably will. I have way too many that should be released. But it's really going to come down to how unpleasant will it be to be in my office doing that sort of thing and doing the metadata, even if they are edited. So, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Happy New Year.